El mundo cambió. Se rompieron los esquemas y se anularon las fronteras.
Más que nunca necesitamos líderes que transformen la educación. Líderes que lleven al equipo a alcanzar su máximo potencial, innovando y creando nuevas propuestas.
Profesionistas apasionados por cambiar sus vidas a través de los dos idiomas de mayor impacto en el mundo y la trascendencia de las culturas.
Profesores que permitan que más mexicanos tengan oportunidades a nivel global.
Necesitamos que más mexicanos hagan historia, explorando el mundo y viviendo nuevas aventuras.
Nuestros jóvenes merecen oportunidades globales.
Por todo eso,
nos transformamos y juntos
escribiremos una nueva historia.
Alrighty, so hello everyone. So thank you everyone for joining us this lovely Thursday. So halfway through the month of May, we've been doing this series of webinars for quite some time, right after the start of the pandemic. So hello guys, welcome. Hi Ricardo, great to have you there, already saying hello in the chat. So welcome Pamela, so welcome everyone. And so today, so what's happening today, guys? So today, remember that the last time you joined us for our academic webinars, we talked about May, and actually, part of June as well, being devoted to how the new digital world is impacting also on the new generations, right? So this is a very engaging topic that we're going to be talking about today. Today we have Heather Gaddis. You've seen her before actually, because some people, I think we have somebody who's very looking, somebody in the crowd that is really definitely looking forward to working with you again, Heather, because people have already made some comments in the chat about this being the second or the third webinar that they've attended, that you've provided already, that you've run already. So but Heather Gaddis is our speaker today. She's going to be talking about digital citizenship and to begin with, what that means, and also in some implications of this new digital world, right? So remember, as usual, guys, we're doing this for you. We are doing this as part of the International House University programs by IH Mexico, so that you can engage with us from anywhere you're connecting from, and regardless of the current pandemic situation, right? So just to keep you engaged, with a range of topics. So as usual, Heather is going to be running the show today, and then if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Heather, you could just go to the Q&A section, and Heather is going to read those questions and answer those in public, so that if there's some really good answers to those questions, also we can share those answers with everyone, and not just with the person that asked the question, because you have some wonderful questions to us sometimes, guys. So anyway, so Heather, welcome. You know her. For those of you that you don't know who she is, she's been working with us for quite some time. This is a topic that she truly enjoys sharing. We were just talking about this right before you joined us. She's a trainer on several of our teacher training courses as well, and now she's connecting from the States today, but she's normally based in the ever so lovely city of Querétaro, right? That's our main teacher training person on the ground, right? Like leading the teacher training staff and team over there in IH Querétaro, right? So thank you very much for being with us today, Heather, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Heather.
Yeah, thank you very much, Orlando. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, but as Orlando said, yeah, today I'm in the United States. One of the great things of being able to work online is being able to be very, very mobile. So as Orlando said, we are going to be talking about digital citizenship, particularly about young learners, but I will be talking about some activities that you could use with older learners as well, maybe changing the topic a little bit or changing the language level. But you could use for a variety of different ages of learners. So I want to see what's going on. Let me get the chat up. Okay, so we have a pretty manageable group today. So I'm going to be asking you for some participation, some questions for you to participate and share in the chat. So hopefully we can get a nice interaction going there as well. And you, as Orlando mentioned, you can always ask questions along the way. Okay, so okay. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, why should we teach young learners, or why should we teach our English language learners about digital citizenship? We have so many other things to teach them about. Grammar, vocabulary, speaking, the things that we consider ours as English language teachers. So why should we even bother? Why should we teach our students, young learners, if you have young learners, why should we teach them about digital citizenship? Okay, so I'll give you about 15 seconds to think, and if you want to, please share it in the chat and we can see what you say. Okay, let's see who's going to be brave. Okay, so yeah, so Zirmato, so that they can be in control of their own current learning. Okay, Eduardo, I would agree with you to a point about students know more about how to use digital technology, or how to use different technologies for certain things, but they don't necessarily know how to be safe. They don't necessarily know how to use it effectively for learning, and they don't necessarily know how to use it in a way that helps them. So students are good at using technology, but not always in the way that's beneficial to them, right? I really like that, Pamela, encouraging respect for other people. And we are going to talk about specifically digital empathy. So yes, that's something I think we have lost with a lot of online communication. Okay, so great. So just to kind of get you thinking, so here's a little a word cloud with some different topics we're going to talk about today. I just wanted to get your brain going. So you see here we have privacy, cyberbullying, news and media literacy, media balance. So these are some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. And digital footprint. And here is the full list of topics we're going to talk about today. Different areas that you can incorporate into your classroom in terms of teaching digital citizenship, because it's kind of difficult to know where to start. Are we talking about digital? Are we talking about skills? Learning, knowing how to copy and paste things, knowing how to use specific technologies, or are we talking about something different? And I would say that with digital citizenship, we're talking about something slightly different from technology skills related to how to use a hardware or software. What we're talking about with digital citizenship is digital identity and footprint. Okay, so we're going to talk about each of these more in a second, but digital identity and footprint is, who are you online? Or how do you shape your own identity online? What communities do you belong to online? Okay, your digital footprint is, what trail are you leaving online as you navigate? when you search for something, when you go to a website, all of that leaves a footprint. So what is that saying about you online, and how are you handling the fact that you are leaving a trail online? Okay, another thing is privacy and security. So how are you keeping yourself safe, your data safe, as well as making sure that other people are safe online? Media balance is another thing that we're going to talk about. So media balance is, how do I make sure that my use of the internet, my use of technology is beneficial to my life and it's not stressing me out even more? So how do I reflect on that? Then next, we're going to talk about news and media literacy. So fake news is the big word here, but how can I check that what I'm reading is true, right? There's a really great commercial on TV in Mexico where it's a family and they're kind of sitting around checking a story. And I think it's a really good attempt by the Mexican government to teach us a little bit about news and media literacy. The next topic we're going to talk about is cyberbullying. So how we can get students to talk about it, how we can get them to reflect on it, what they need to know about it. And then finally, as Pamela mentioned, respect. So part of that is digital empathy. So how can I show empathy to people online? How can I have discussions online that are productive in that everyone gets to share their point of view and that everyone feels respected? Okay, so just want to ask you one question. I'll give you about 15 seconds to respond. Which of these topics do you think your students need the most and why? Okay, so which of these topics is most important for your students and why? Okay, thank you, Nancy. I agree, Eduardo, that the students' age and their acts, if they're using technology on their own, that is a key thing to take into account. Okay, so Nancy, I agree that privacy and security feels something that's very urgent, right? Something that is a danger for a student. So it feels very urgent. It can feel very urgent. Okay, so we're going to go to our first topic. And as I said, the first topic is digital identity and footprint. And so here I'm going to have on each slide, as we talk about, a few basic objectives, areas that you could include with your students. Again, as we just saw in the chat, several of you responded, it depends, right? Which is completely valid in this situation. Some of it depends on the age of your students, their access to technology, or do they have their own device, for example? And it depends on, their experience level. But some basic things that we should consider when it comes to digital footprint and identity is, yes. So is for them to be able to define a digital footprint and identify the activities that contribute to it. And the reason that this is important is that it is very difficult for younger students, particularly, to realize that everything they do online can be seen. Because this is something that's very abstract for them, right? So they need to see it physically, for example, using something like making prints in sand, or actually painting their hand and putting it on it, so that they understand that everything they do online is the same. So I'll tell you a story. I'm here in the United States with my 9-year-old nephew, and he got in trouble last week because he was looking at something online at school that he was not supposed to look at. He did not know that everything he looks at online at school, the school can see what he's doing, right? So students need to be aware of this, that they are leaving trails, so that they know that things that they do online are not necessarily as private as they think. Another thing they need to do, students need to be able to do, is to reflect on how we shape our identity through our online activity, right? So the websites that we go to, the comments that we make on social media, the things that we like on social media, the ads that we click on, all of this makes up our identity, and we need to understand that, because then we can understand better why we are seeing certain things on social media, why we are seeing certain advertisements on social media. And then students need to be able to identify their responsibilities for shaping their online, their digital footprint. How can they check what people can see about them online? How can they keep that in mind when they're posting, when they're sharing things on social media, when they're liking things on social media, keeping the fact that they have a digital footprint, they have one, and how any comments they make can shape that footprint in the future. Okay, so here is an activity. It's actually from one of my favorite websites when it comes to teaching this for all ages, not just for young learners, but it certainly does do a very good job of teaching young learners. Okay, so here is an example of a really great activity from this. This is for grade 4, so upper elementary, but I think that we could use it for older students as well. So here we see that we have an activity, and then we're having students reflect on that activity. So for example, Camilla appears in a video of a school play that her parents post on a video sharing website. So these are real scenarios that students can reflect on, right? So if you saw this video of Camila, what would you think of her, right? Is Camila in control of this, right? The idea here is to help students understand that there are things about our digital footprint that we have control of and things that we don't have control of, okay? So here we have different scenarios. So Camila posts comments about dancing videos on YouTube. She creates a wish list of things she wants for her birthday on her parents' online shopping account. So the idea is to have students reflect on real scenarios. Sometimes I find that some of these scenarios maybe aren't the most relevant for our students in Mexico. And so we can change these, right, in order to make them relevant for our students. So I think the first one's relevant, but maybe not the third one. So these are some scenarios that students could reflect on. A really nice speaking activity. You could have, you could do a jigsaw speaking activity where different groups, pairs or trios of students discuss different activities, and then they exchange ideas on the activity or the scenario that they discussed. You could do very short writing activities, a writing forum if you do online work, where students each contribute their idea of what they would think, and then you can bring it to a consensus during your live class. Okay, so these are, you have the scenarios, the students' reflection, and then another decision for them to make. Is the student in control of this activity? So I'm going to just pause for 1 second and give you a chance to contribute. So if you were going to do this activity, so how would you do this activity with your students? So would you do it online? Would you have it as a speaking activity? How could you adapt this activity for your class? So I'll give you about 15-20 seconds. And I'm seeing your comment now, Claudia, about news and media literacy. I think this is definitely something that we all need to be aware of, right? Then, critical reading and comprehension and thinking skills. Okay. Yep, Eduardo, I think that university students could definitely do this as either a mingle. If we had once we have physical classes, you could have students do this as a mingle. You could do this as breakout rooms as well. Maybe giving them 2 or 3 different scenarios to talk about in their breakout room, and then come back to the whole group and share. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Eduardo, for your contribution. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next activity or the next topic. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Nancy. Having like debates or maybe having them propose 2 or 3 different solutions and then the group saying which one is the best, maybe. So yeah, because this is one where the idea is to reflect and for them to get their opinions, right? And then maybe what should she do? Maybe lead it into recommendations, right? Okay. So the next topic, like I said, is privacy and security. And so this is a really big topic that we have to start with young kids. But with young kids, we have to be very careful about what we're talking about. Because there are some aspects of privacy and security, such as online grooming of children, that we don't probably want to get to as teachers, but we do want students to be aware of some basic things like identifying what information they can share online. Right? What is okay and what is not okay to share online? What is the difference between private and personal information? So for younger students, this can be difficult for them to differentiate between what is private and that you shouldn't share it online because someone could identify you specifically, and what is just personal. So private information, so we'll see some examples and some activity examples in a second, but private information is your complete name, your complete date of birth, a picture of you with your school uniform on, your complete address. So these are things we do not want to share online. Whereas personal information might be something about me, but it could apply to other people as well. So I'm from North Carolina. That is something that's about me, but it also applies to a lot of other people. So we want students to be able to differentiate between things that they should never share and things that they can share with, as long as they feel safe sharing. And I think another important thing is to start helping students understand the importance of creating strong passwords. At a very early age now, students have multiple accounts for school, for academics, for personal accounts, and they need to know the importance of creating strong passwords. Okay, so here are a couple of activities. Okay, so one activity that we can do, and this would be with slightly younger students, would be an exit ticket. So an exit ticket is when at the end of class, so before students leave class, right now that's digitally leave class, but they are going to complete an exit ticket. So an exit ticket usually is a very, very short formative assessment that has 2, maybe 3 questions about the class, right? The idea for you as the teacher is to see, do they have a basic idea, a basic grasp of what you saw in that class today, right? It's not something you're probably going to give even a grade to, or maybe it's just a check. But the idea here is for you to take like a little temperature check of what happened. So in this case, we could ask students, imagine we are welcoming a new student to school. So what is one piece of personal information you would share with him or her? And what is one piece of private information you would not share, and why not? Right? So here, this is pretty simple. It should take students just a minute or 2 to complete this. And this gives you a very, very quick but effective way to see, did students understand what we talked about in this class, right? You can use something like Google Forms and use it as a quiz, or you can have students send you a quick email, whatever system you use. But the idea here is for you to get a very quick but clear snapshot about in this case, about privacy and security, but about whatever you're teaching. So I see that in the chat that Nancy says she uses exit tickets a lot. Let us know in the chat, do you use exit tickets a lot? Okay, if so, how? Okay, so okay. So here are some snapshots from a game. So a really good way to integrate digital citizenship into the classroom is through games, right? Through gamification, something that students get immediate feedback on. So here, this idea is that students are going to be choosing which one would be appropriate for them to write, right? So should they share their email or their phone number, or should they just say, call me, right? So which message would be the most appropriate to send? Okay, another example is here. So should they say, my name is, and give their complete name? Or should they just give screen names and not give their complete name, right? So here we're giving students a chance to do some basic reading comprehension and a way to get very quick and immediate feedback on their understanding of this. And students generally, especially younger students, they generally enjoy the gamification, the competitive aspect of this. Okay. So the next topic that I want to talk about is media balance. So this is one I don't think we talk about, as even people who do talk about digital citizenship, I don't think that we talk about this one quite as much. When we talk about digital citizenship, we are often talking about using technology, not using technology. So the media balance here is what we want students to do is to reflect on what activities you do online and offline, right? So reflect on what is your identity online, what is your identity offline, right? And the fact that we don't live all of our lives in either space, right? Having students identify how long you spend on online activities, right? So they could keep a log, a record book where they talk about what activities they did, how long they did it. And then you could do that over a couple of days, and then students can kind of see how much time they're spending on certain activities online. And then you could also have students, the idea here is for students to use that information to reflect on how they feel when they spend too much time online, right? The idea here is for students to learn how to have a certain amount of self-control when it comes to their own use of mobile devices and the internet. Okay, so a good way that we can talk with students about this or help students express themselves talk about this is through sentence frames. Okay, so sentence frames are we use these often with very young learners or young learners at the beginning of elementary, but I think they could also be useful for slightly older students as well, who maybe even in Spanish sometimes have a hard time expressing their feelings about things. Okay, and then they can expand upon this in a one-on-one conversation with a classmate, right? So here, this is a very simple one you could use with first graders in elementary school, and then you could make it slightly more complex for older students. So here the idea is that students say, I feel, and then you have a list of adjectives related to their feelings. You could expand this, and then when, and then they put the online activity, okay? So here are two examples from me, and I want you to go ahead and start thinking about your own examples because that's what's coming up next. So I feel stressed when I look at Facebook for too long. Well, I feel stressed when I look at Facebook in general, but I could add to that, I feel stressed when I look at Facebook for too long. I feel happy when I talk to my sister via Messenger. Okay, so the idea here is for students who are lower level, either because of their age or because of their proficiency level, the sentence frame gives them something to insert to get started with talking. Because especially with younger students, they tend to kind of say to us, "Como se dice?" And then they give us like a 3 minute, and you're like, whoa. And often the issue is they don't know how to get started, right? So this gives them something to get started. And it can also be really useful with writing to help them start writing, help them get that process started. Okay, so here we're using sentence frames and I want to see yours. So I want you to write 2 sentences for me. So one, a positive, negative one. So like my first sentence, I feel stressed, and a second one, a positive, right? So the idea here is for us to recognize that the use of the internet and the use of digital technology in our life has positive and negative influences on how we feel. And for students to be able to identify when they have a positive experience and when they have a negative experience, so that they can, adjust their use of digital technologies accordingly. Okay, so what I'm going to give you about 30 seconds this time to write 2 sentences using the sentence frames. So 1 positive and 1 negative. Okay. Yep, I feel sad when the internet doesn't work. Yeah. Okay, great. So, yep, Ricardo, I feel motivated when I take great online courses. So, you're identifying there that learning online is a positive interaction that you have online. Okay. Yeah. So, Mariana, so I feel happy when I make a video call with your brother. Yep, exactly. Okay, yes, Nancy, I definitely feel you there. I feel happy when my students turn on their cameras, right? Yes. And I've noticed something, Nancy, when I have them talk to each other more, they turn on their cameras more than when I'm talking. Okay, I feel stressed when the internet comes and goes. I feel happy when my students are engaged in class. Great. So this could be a really good way to start a class. So, having students share, or it could be a really good way for them to use language related to feelings, right? So you could incorporate this into different classes that we do, right? Either related, to the simple present, right? Because all of this is in the simple present if you want to keep it in the same sentence frame, or related to using adjectives for feelings, right? So you could adapt this to whatever language that you're teaching. So yeah. Yeah, Ricardo. So I feel tired when I read text on screen. Excellent example. Okay. Okay, so another activity you could do with this, and this would be with slightly younger students because it has them creating a poster, but you could do it with maybe upper elementary as well. They could use an infographic if you're looking at that type of text type. With older students, it would probably be with a lower level language course for them to do this type of thing, that maybe you're having them look at imperatives, right? That they could do this type of thing with. But it's something you could also do probably very quickly in class. If you use Jamboard or if you use a digital whiteboard, students could easily draw this. So what I'm talking about here is creating a safety poster, right? So have students create a safety poster where they identify activities where devices should not be used, or where there should be limits on their use, right? So what I'm thinking about here is having probably not a physical poster, but a digital poster with activities. I'll give you one example, and then you're going to give me more examples. So an example of do not use your phone when you are riding your bike, right? And so having a picture there, somebody riding their bike, and then an X over it of that is not an appropriate situation for people to use their cell phones or a digital device. Maybe there are other situations where it's okay to use it for a moment, but there should be some limits. Okay, so what are some activities that you would put on a poster that you should not do while you are using technology, that you should be technology-free times? Okay. So I'll give you about 15 seconds. So which activities? Okay, so yeah, So I think the idea, like, I think there is a lot more attention being paid recently to emotions. I don't know if it's always being paid to like how technology makes us feel, but I think that would be a great integration of this topic of media balance, right? It's generally the term. Okay. Okay, you should not answer video calls in the bathroom, right? No one wants to see that. That's not necessary. Thank you, Mariana. Yeah. Okay. So, so what are some other situations when we should not be using digital devices? So we should, I'll give you one more example. We should not use digital devices when we are having a face-to-face conversation, right? It's because it's disrespectful, right? So there are some issues which are safety and there are some which are respect. Okay, so the next topic we're going to go to. Oh, I got one message. I'm going to see if what we got. You shouldn't. Yep, exactly. I think that's a great one for students to come to on their own. So you shouldn't use digital devices in bed. So before you go to sleep and when the lights are off, right? So the idea that we should have a balance and that that can affect our sleep, right? Yeah. Okay. So, as I said, the next topic we're going to talk about is news and media literacy. So this is a really big topic that, again, the complexity is going to depend on the age of your students. But some examples of some objectives that we should try to cover with students is differentiating between fake news and credible news, right? So learning how to identify credible news websites, learning how to identify bias in writing, learning how to identify, looking at an article for maybe typographical errors or statements that are just untrue or statements that they have no backup information for, right? So having students look at articles and identify bias, identify very dramatic or shocking language that wouldn't be used in a news article, right? Another would be evaluating the credibility of information on the internet, right? So just like the commercial from the Mexican government says, checking multiple sites to see, do other websites say the same thing, right? And here I also having students reflect on the reasons why people post misleading information on the internet, right? So having students understand why people might want to manipulate information on the internet is key for them to be able to identify fake or misleading information, because they can know what are people's bias, who is posting this, what are they getting out of this. So having students reflect on that can make them much more critical thinkers, and it would be a very interesting debate or discussion to have. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of, okay. So we're going to do this activity. I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to do it. I have done this activity and I'll tell you what the result was. I did it with 9th graders. So the last year of secundaria in the school that I was working at, it was considered high school, but it was the last year of secundaria. I did this type of activity with them. Okay, so I'll explain the activity and then I'll give you about 30 or 40 seconds to do some searching, and then I'll see what your conclusions are about this activity. So what I asked the students to do, I put them into groups of about 3 or 4 students, and I gave each of them, they had a Chromebook to use for the whole group. And all I said to the students was, today we're going to learn some more about researching on the internet. And each of them had a worksheet. They had, it was a table very similar to this one. They had 3 different animals to research, and they had a series of pieces of information that they had to fill in about each of these animals. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a couple seconds. I want you to put your student hat on, and I want you to do research. Find the habitat, find what each one preys on, find the natural predators of each of these animals. Okay, so I'll give you I'll give you 30 seconds, okay? Starting now, and then I'll ask you for your answers in 30 seconds. Okay. Okay, so if you guys would like to share, what did you find out about these animals? Okay, so we're looking at the sparkle muffin. Okay, the spider lives in Australia. Okay. Okay, so we got some more. So one of them is a new species of spiders. Okay. Did we find anything else out about the other two animals? Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question in the chat. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think about it. Okay, so which of these animals is not real? Yeah. So yes, thank you, Ziamara. So the tree octopus. So I did this activity, like I said, with I think they were 14, 15 years old. And I gave them about 15 minutes and 15 minutes to do the research, right? There were more questions than this. They had to draw a picture of the animal. They had to find the prey, or what it preyed on, natural predators, habitat, a couple other things. And then I wrote on the board, because this was before COVID, I wrote on the board which of these animals is not real. I did this with 2 classes of 9th graders. In both classes, all of them looked at me like I was crazy. They were like, "What are you talking about, miss? Like, what do you mean which one of them is not real?" And I said, "Well, exactly that. Which one of these is fake?" And none of them, they were all completely shocked by this, that one of these could be fake, because for all of them, there is information on the internet. But the difference is, for the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, there's really only one website out there that is about this animal. And the website, if you look at it, looks like it was created by a 5 or 6-year-old. It has very bright colors. It has very playful font. And if you look at it, the predator of the Pacific Northwest tree octopus is Sasquatch, so Bigfoot. So, students read this. They wrote Bigfoot down on their sheet as the predator. but none of them questioned the fact that this information might not be real, because they believe that everything that they see online is real. Okay, so I did do a kind of a trick of, tricking the students into, kind of presenting it as a different activity, and then having them, realize after the activity was over that the octopus was not real, but it was something that they found extremely shocking. Even one student told me that she wanted to go to California and find and go see this tree octopus. Yeah, it was a hoax, Jacqueline. Yeah, it was a hoax that was created by a professor specifically to teach students about identifying fake news and credible websites online, right? Another thing that you could have, if you've ever, another internet hoax that you could use would be drop bears. Drop bears are aggressive koala bears from Australia that don't really exist, but that's another thing you could have students look up and, follow the development of internet hoaxes. Having them really identify, do some research, can help them to identify why these things were invented and how they have, created a life of their own online. Okay, so another activity that you could have students do, so you could show them. So this picture on the left is the picture you would show the students, and the idea here is to ask students to identify, and this could be a really good picture description activity. So you could have students describe the picture. I see an old city. It's probably in Europe. It's completely frozen. The ice looks very thick, right? And so you could have them describe it, and then you can ask the students after they describe each image, and that's a really good activity for both PET students and for certificate students. And then you could incorporate the aspect of digital citizenship by asking them, is this image real? Right? And some of them, you could have some images that are real, that are, just kind of, they're crazy images, but they're real. And then you could have some images that are not real, which is the case with the image that we're seeing in front of us, right? So the two images that were used to create this image on the left was the one below, which is a legitimately frozen place. And then the image above, which is the city of Venice in Italy, right? So we can see very clearly how these two images were merged to create a fake image that Venice had frozen over, right? And, create some sensational fake news story online, right? So other examples might be, a tiger swimming in the middle of the Indian Ocean, right? Like in the middle, like thousands of, hundreds of kilometers from land, or making it look like someone's holding something that they're not holding in their hand, right? So making students aware that, okay, information can be manipulated online, but one thing that's really special about a lot of the information that we encounter online that is visual information, right? So I found this by Googling fake news, right? Or fake images. And there are actually lots of websites that have that can go into this, and they help you, and you could pull these images. And like I said, you could use these for image descriptions, short speaking activities where students describe an image to each other, and then go incorporate the aspect of, is this image real or not? Okay, so I'm going to stop for 1 second and ask if anybody has any questions up to here. I'll give you about 15-20 seconds to put your questions in the chat. Yeah, it was quite easy to find images, Nancy. And like I said, you could just show them the left image and, or you could hide it if you're using PowerPoint or some other similar thing. Hide it with like a square on top, a rectangle on top, and then reveal it, right? And show them the other part of it, right? So I think it serves our purposes as English language teachers really well. You could find images. A lot of these are images of places, landscapes or cities. So if you're doing anything related to that type of vocabulary, or like I said, if you're preparing students for a PET exam or for certificate exam, this could be a fun way to incorporate picture description to class, right? Okay. Okay, so the next topic that we're going to talk about is cyberbullying. And again, the age of your students is going to depend on how you want to approach this, or the level of detail or the types of situations that you want to get into. But some things that students should be able to identify when it comes to cyberbullying is so what is cyberbullying, right? What are different types of cyberbullying? So examples of cyberbullying are harassment. So for some aspect of your identity, students being harassed for their looks, for their sexual orientation, from where they're from, their ethnic background, their gender, all of that. So harassment online, students being impersonated online is an example of cyberbullying. So if someone has hacked into or stolen their password and now is acting like them online, that's an example of cyberbullying. Someone who is trolling them online. So if they're constantly making comments to the student online on Facebook or on a social media, they're responding to their comments in a very negative, excessively negative way. That's an example of cyberbullying. So sending threatening messages is an example of cyberbullying. So anything that makes the student feel uncomfortable. And as if you are a young learner teacher, this is something that can definitely affect students' behavior in class, right? They often become withdrawn, they become emotionally, they have kind of unpredictable responses at sometimes. Maybe they're not hanging out with the same people. This can be difficult, I think, right now, since we don't have our eyes on students as much, but it's definitely something for us to be aware of in class. What kind of messages are students sending back and forth on platforms? What visibility do you have of those messages? For example, if you use Zoom, do you allow students to have to send each other private messages, or can they only send you private messages? So in addition to identifying what cyberbullying is, another thing for students to be aware of is how to be an upstander. And this is a relatively new word in the English language. So I think probably many people have heard of the word bystander. And bystander is someone who just stands by and watches something happen, right? So, you see someone being hurt, you see a car accident, and you just are kind of a passive witness. An upstander is someone who sees something happening and does something about it. That doesn't mean that this person turns into a bully, but if it's an online discussion, maybe an upstander will say, I don't think that's appropriate, right? Or it's not we should respect each other and not name call. Or if an upstander doesn't feel comfortable doing that, or that's not the type of situation we're dealing with, an upstander can also reach out to the person who's being bullied to give them support, right? Say, hey, I noticed that someone responded to you really negatively, or they called you a name. Are you okay, right? So either an upstander can respond directly to the bully, or can offer a support to the person that's being bullied so that they know that they're not alone. So students need to be aware of this term so that they are aware of the actions that they can take in order to be an upstander, and to do this in a way that's respectful so that they don't turn into a bully. Another thing that's important for students to know is how to use function and tools to block or report cyberbullies, right? So on Facebook, on Instagram, on other sites, there are community guidelines that dictate how we should treat each other online. And there are ways to report and block people online. I know it's not always as perfect as it doesn't work as perfectly as we would want to, but students do need to be aware that that these are not public spaces, that when they're interacting online, these are private networks, and that if they feel that they should report someone, especially if it's a school network, that they should use those functions and those tools to block or report somebody in a way that's anonymous, in a way that they feel comfortable with. Here's an activity that you could have students do. So this is an example of a game. It's on Common Sense, the first website that we saw. And I like this for English language learners for a couple of reasons. The language is relatively simple, but it's it's accessible for many levels of students, and so you get to build in vocabulary related to digital citizenship, and then some light reading comprehension related to digital citizenship as well. So you could, if you don't want students to play this game, you could take screenshots similar to what I've done, or just use these questions to give you inspiration, right? To give you a way for students to discuss this. You could use this scenario and take out the options and have students discuss this in small groups, and then share that with the group. So you could use that, or you could have students play this. If you do a flipped classroom model, you could have students play this before you talk about cyberbullying in class, and then they could bring their experiences and the things that they saw in this type of game to class, and have more to contribute to class, because they would have already had a basic level of understanding. Okay, so so I'm going to stop and ask again if there are any questions before we talk about our last topic. Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Nancy. Okay, good. Okay, say thank you, Ricardo, for reminding that. No, so the name is Common Sense Media. So this is the name of the website that I mentioned at the beginning. So it has K through 12 lesson plans. Okay. So on different aspects of digital citizenship. So I will just say that these are not necessarily lesson plans meant for English language learners, but in general, the language is quite accessible, especially for the elementary students. Sometimes when you get to the high school lesson plans, and it can get a little bit more complex, the language that they're introducing. But sometimes what I like to do is, maybe I won't do the whole lesson plan from Common Sense. I'll just take a discussion activity. They have some really good discussion prompts that are really well thought out. So and they have things in Spanish as well, if you also teach Spanish, or if you, one really good thing about Common Sense Media is that they have materials for parents. So if you are teaching K through 12 or young learners, they have materials in Spanish if you, for you to be able to send those to parents, for parents to be able to talk to their children about these aspects as well, to incorporate this, because yes, we can talk about this with, we could talk about this in class, but this is also something that needs to be reinforced at home. So Ricardo, if you could ask the question in the Q&A, if you see there's like two little like talk bubbles, and I will get to any questions near the end. So just thank you, Ricardo, for reminding me. If anybody else, if you have questions that you want me to address at the end of the presentation, you can use the little Q&A. It's a little bit different from the chat, and I will bring those up at the end of the presentation. Okay, so the last topic that we're going to talk about is digital empathy. Okay, so this is a topic that maybe is a little bit newer in the way that we talk about it in terms of teaching digital citizenship, but I think it's one that we can all agree is something we definitely need to be talking about, especially after the year we've had of maybe communicating online more than usual. So one thing that students need to be able to do, and adults, not just students is to identify how communicating online is different from communicating face-to-face, okay? And then they need to discuss how they can be aware of other people's feelings online. Because part of the reason that digital empathy is very difficult for us is because of the differences between communicating online and communicating face-to-face. So that's the next question for you to think about, and see if you can give me a couple of responses. So how is communicating online different from face-to-face? Okay, so I'll give you about 30 seconds to think about that. Okay, because I don't think it's an interesting, something really interesting to reflect on, I think. So how is communicating online different from face-to-face? Yep. Okay. Some good comments coming up. Yeah, so one thing that I think several people mentioned was emotions, right? It can be difficult to read intentions and emotions because we can't see the person's face. And that also means it can be easy for us to assume things, to assume how the other person is feeling, or to assume they're feeling the same way that we are because we can't see their face, right? So, and also not being able to see the person can sometimes make us feel more comfortable saying things that are mean, that we would not say in other situations, right? Another situation that is different online, as Xiomara pointed out, that can be good, is that we do also have time for reflection, right? We can take time to read it and to respond. The other side of that is sometimes people online are very, very anxious for a response, right? So people can see that you left them on read, that you have read their comment, but you have not responded to it. So people often online expect, even though the communication is asynchronous, meaning it's not always happening in real time, especially with things like Messenger and WhatsApp, people often think that it should happen in real time. So there's different expectations, right? Okay. Another thing that happens in online communication is people have a lack of respect for authority, right? So when we're online, we kind of think, well, we're in this place where like no one's really in charge, right? So we can say what we want, we can do what we want. And students may feel that way, right? So the teacher can't really see what I'm doing. Or if I'm on social media, who is really the boss anyway? No one can really do anything to me, even if I say something really horrible, right? So people tend to kind of not have respect for authority, or not feel that there's authority, and not feel that there's any consequences for their actions online, right? So so there can be a lot of different ways in terms of how it can be difficult for us to interpret other people's emotions, and it can be much easier for us to say things online that we would never ever say to someone face to face, right? And students need to be aware of that so that they can try to control that instinct, or that to say something that's really mean online that they would never say to that person's face, or they would probably never say to that person's face. We also need to be aware of how that changes the way we have debate online, right? We tend to be more personal when we debate online because we want to attack the person, because we can't see them. We just want to win, and we can't see the hurt on their face when we say things that are very negative. Okay, so students need to be aware of this when they are communicating online, and they also need to be aware of tools that we have online that we can use to communicate our emotions. So there are emojis, and I know as teachers we don't want to encourage students to use emojis in formal writing, but I think an interesting way we could have it would be for students to use emojis when we're teaching more informal language, right? They could almost do they could exchange messages using emojis, using memes as a visual way of communication, to learn how to use those visual means of communication in a positive way. Okay. Okay, so this is another situation where I think that sentence frames are very useful, because the idea of digital empathy is for them to be able to express their emotions, express how they're making someone else feel, and how someone else has made them feel online, and also to be able to express themselves in a way that's respectful online, that continues healthy debate, and it doesn't go down the path of people just being mean to each other on Facebook, right? So we can give students different scenarios. So here's a scenario where a digital citizen wants to acknowledge their new learning, that they've changed their mind or they've learned something as a result of their community interactions. And so here we might give students just a brief frame, and then for them to continue and to expand upon that, right? So I used to think, but now I understand, right? So giving students that language to help them get started. Another situation, here's another scenario. So a digital citizen reads a viewpoint that they agree with, right? So thank you, blank, to the person for presenting your viewpoint. I agree because, right? So this is also really important functional language for students to know how to engage. It could be in face-to-face debates, but also in online debates or online discussions, that they know how to agree, they know how to disagree in a polite way. So you can incorporate, so again, if you are teaching students who are preparing for the first certificate, one of the things that they need to be able to do is to agree and disagree and justify their opinion, right? And so you can incorporate digital citizenship into this by using online discourse, online conversations as a platform for it, right? As a platform to present and practice that language. Okay, so we're going to go. So here are the 6 topics that we talked about. Okay, so we talked about digital identity and footprint. So remember, digital footprint is the trail that we leave online as we as we search, as we navigate, as we click on things. And I would challenge everybody here tonight to Google themselves to see what can be found about you online, and also to consider clearing your cache, to clear the cookies of all the websites that you have seen, you've looked at recently. Over the last couple months, we've had to accept a lot of cookies every time you go to a website. You click on cookies, you accept all cookies, and what that does is it places a tracking. It gives the website the ability to track what you've done on that website, and it also gives them an ability to look into your digital footprint. So you can always clear your cookies in order to get a slightly different experience online, a less closed experience. So we also talked about privacy and security. So remember, privacy and security, from younger age, we need to talk about just the same way that in the United States we have the term stranger danger, of students recognizing that who is a stranger, who is not online. Everyone's a stranger. So we need them to recognize what is personal information, what is private information. So what can you share and what can you not share? And then we can go up from there, creating secure passwords, looking at online scams or being aware of scams, how to respond to scams. We can go from there. But the very basic is, what should you share online and what shouldn't you share online? And then media balance. I think this is particularly relevant for those of you who work with elementary and middle school, secundaria students, because this is when their habits are being established. This is when their ability to reflect about these types of things is being established before they get addicted to their devices and to the internet. So having them reflect on how different activities online make them feel, what things they do online make them have a beneficial impact on their mood and on how they feel, and what things don't, and when should they be using their internet and when should they not, either for safety reasons or for respect. And then news and media literacy. So this is related, this term, if you want to look for more information, these are really good search terms for you guys to use. So news and media literacy refers to the idea of being able to differentiate between relevant or credible and non and fake news, and also the ability to search for information, to understand what you're seeing online. You know, where is the information on the page? How do you find information effectively online? And this is something that students think that they do well, but they don't do particularly well. So having students research things, you know, when they're in primary school, giving them a link, not having them just search the internet. We never want to have students search the internet if we're not sure what they're going to find, right? So when they're young, giving them a link, and then when they're older, maybe giving them a couple of links to choose from, and learning how to summarize and paraphrase. And then when they get older, doing some more research into things that are fake news, comparing sources, and having debates about those types of, about that information. And then the last, these last two topics is cyberbullying. So again, this is something I think that is particularly pressing and particularly important for those of you that work with elementary and middle school students, is the idea of cyberbullying. So I think having students know what it is, and you know, the types of cyberbullying, having them discuss scenarios, having them learn about the consequences, and then having them learn about how they can help each other if they do see that there is cyberbullying happening, because they're going to see it, and not necessarily always tell us. So having them have some recourse, some resources that they can use to help support each other. And then last but certainly not least is digital empathy. So digital empathy is, how can we always keep in mind that the person on the other end is a person, right? It's not a bot, even though sometimes it is a bot, but it is another human being that we're talking to. So how can we include in the way that we communicate respect, share our emotions, check their emotions, always be aware that what we're saying might be interpreted by the other person, so that we can be nicer, we can be kinder to each other online, and it's not such a negative experience to be on, especially social media. Okay, so these are so 6, I think, really important topics that you know, if you want to incorporate digital citizenship into your classroom, I think are really good places to start. Like I said at the beginning, no matter what age, but the type of topics you're going to get to are going to vary by the age of your students and the type of class that you teach. Like I know some of you that are here are teaching university. University students where maybe it isn't your main job to teach them digital citizenship, but if you have the opportunity to incorporate it, either through a reading or through a debate or something like that, it's always a really good idea. I'm working with university students, and we had a very interesting debate about privacy and surveillance, about, you know, should the government be able to watch us? And we watched a 5-minute part of a documentary that I highly recommend. It's called Coded Bias. So Jacqueline, I know you're nice, but not everybody's nice, right? So Coded Bias is a documentary that's on Netflix that I wouldn't necessarily have your students watch the whole thing. It's you know, it's a regular length documentary, but there are lots of resources online to help students have this debate, right? So in my case, I had my students watch just a 5-minute portion, but it was enough for us to have a really interesting conversation in class about their perspective about the topic. Okay, so I'm now gonna okay, so for scanning Okay, so I'm going to see if there are any other questions, Ricardo, just before, because there are any questions that are related to what we're talking about tonight. So does anybody have any questions about this topic or or comments that they want to make? So if you have a comment, so I have the question and answer part up if anyone wants to ask a question. Okay. Ooh, let me get the chat up too. Okay. Thank you, Eduardo. So I hope that the message or the idea that you've received here is that digital citizenship is hard to say that word a lot of times, or that term, is something that can be incorporated alongside, right? It's not necessarily something that you just have to take one class and do, but it's something that is a part of all of our lives, and so that it needs to be incorporated in natural ways, to have debates, to express our feelings, to do reading, to watch short videos, and listening comprehension. And if you do teach young learners, I think this is something that is really good to build in with any units on health, right? So when you teach the good eating plate or plato de buen comer, we should also teach the idea of media balance, right? If we're teaching students the idea of a balanced diet, we should also teach them the idea of a balanced media diet, right? So when we're teaching, when we're talking to young students about identity, we can talk about online identity as well, right? Okay, so I'm going to answer this question live. So any resources or links. So the resource that I shared at the beginning is, and I'm going to put this also, is Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media, one thing that I really like about their resources, the way they have their curriculum organized is by, elementary. They even start with kindergarten. They don't have very much for kindergarten, but they have a few things. And then they have things that are specifically for middle school and high school students. And many of their lessons include short videos with high school students or with middle school students talking about how they feel, why they have used the internet in this way, or the consequences of using the internet in this way. So you will have to probably use the subtitles. These are American teenagers talking. So depending on the level of your students, you may have to really think about the language, or if you want to use subtitles to help students, that language be more accessible to students. But that's a good place to start. Another place to start for this is the United Kingdom has what they call, there's an organization called the UK Internet Safety Day, and every single year, it was in April or late March, they have an Internet Safety Day, and every single year it's a different topic. And this past year, their focus was on being kind and respectful online. So they also have resources. They have board games. They have activities that you can use in class, like I said, board games and questions, discussion questions to help students get started in this. But they have this UK Internet Safety Day has gone back for several years. And so you can look back over the years and see the different themes of every year. So like I said, this past year, their focus was on digital empathy, but other years it's been on digital footprint or on bullying and things like that. And you can find the resources, and they have the resources in packs based on, for lower, middle, and higher older students. So they have that as well. And Ricardo, that reminds me, there is a really great activity about, having students create an avatar, right? So this will be for younger students, having them draw their avatar and then explain to somebody why they created their avatar in that way, right? Because an avatar is a digital representation of ourselves. Why did you color yourself that way? Why did you represent yourself that way, right? And this is a way of introducing the topic of what an avatar is and how students should use this online, maybe instead of a photo of themselves, and also a chance for them to express themselves and how they can use digital media to express themselves online, right? Okay, so yeah, so I'll write this in the chat as well. So Common Sense Media, this is a US based organization, and then UK Internet Safety Day is a UK based organization that, like I said, has an annual event with resources for educators that you could easily adapt for your age of students or for your classes. Okay, so any other questions related to this topic? Okay. So I'm going to just address Ricardo's comment real fast as far as finding online activities. I think one of the advantages of what we're doing right now in terms of teaching online is access to text, and it would be, my recommendation will be to find out what your students are interested in and find text based on that, because with scanning and skimming, with the skimming text, having students previewing a text by either looking at the title, having them look at the first and last sentence of each paragraph, if it's a longer text, having them look at any images that are in the text, and having them use these clues, in order to preview, to make predictions about the text, and then have them look at it in more detail. With things like scanning, you need something that has something that students can scan for, but I think that there are lots of websites out there, lots of websites and text out there. One really good thing would be to look for, I'm going to type the answer. There is something called News ELA. And what I like about News ELA is that you can adjust the difficulty level of the text. So there are news articles, and you can say, oh, I want it at this level or this level, and you can get the same article at different levels. You can also do that with, you can go to like National Geographic Kids or things like that and get news articles. There's also Breaking News English. These are, great different articles out there. But the good thing is that I would start with, what are your students interested in? And then go from there to find something that is at their language level, but something that's interesting, because we have a lot more flexibility than we used to in that aspect. Okay. So I'm going to give one last chance for any questions or comments that anyone wants to make in the question and answer or in the chat. Okay. So I think I'm going to hand it back over to Orlando, who usually has a few announcements to make at the end of these webinars. So I'm going to stop share. Okay, and so that he can take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Heather. So all righty, guys. So so let's thank Heather for her lovely work, because I think she gave us like loads of information and loads of ideas, that people can try, can consider. Definitely, Shamara is already. Thank you, Heather. So thank you very much for that. And this is always such an engaging topic to discuss, right? Especially I mean, given the current circumstances, of course. Absolutely. So anyway, so guys, remember that we're doing this for you, because we've been in these current circumstances for quite a long time, quite such a lengthy I mean amount of time now, that we've been in the current pandemic circumstances. Some of you maybe are already going back or planning on going back to the face-to-face classroom, but we will keep running these webinars. We're looking into getting a new season of webinars with different focus, right? So what I would like to do right now is, if you could please give us some feedback. Always we truly appreciate the feedback. So I'll send you a link to the form that we have devised for this. So I'll just send it here in the chat. There we go. So that is the form, and we would truly appreciate it again, as usual, if you could just give us 5 minutes of, actually less than 5 minutes, just like go there, like multiple choice, give us your ideas. And remember that here at the end, we go all the way to the end, you have this question, what other English language teaching topics would you like to have future training in, right? So as I said, we are, we're planning on renewing the season of webinars, but we're going to give it a different angle. They're going to have a different taste. So we will definitely be reading the feedback. We've been getting feedback all throughout the pandemic now, and we want to make sure that whatever we do in the future is relevant, right? So anyway, so if you could just give your feedback there, we will appreciate it. And then, as usual, I'll just give you a reminder of what's happening in the next coming weeks. So if you go to our University Media Room website, I'll give you the link again, right? So it's right here in the chat box. So if you go there, you're going to find all of these wonderful things that we're running. Next one, what's happening next time you come back for the webinar? That's May the 27th, and we'll be, talking about how your teenagers, your teenage students can really give, just like the title says, 120% in your classes. So we'll be talking about gamification, the use of games in the classroom, and how we can use those games to help our learners improve their performance, right? So quite interesting topic. So remember, May 27th, and again, you can just directly register on the link I sent. And if you're interested in our YouTube channel, I'll again copy paste the link right here. Please subscribe, because all of these webinars, we record them and we make them available right here on our YouTube channel. As you can see, we are broadcasting live right now in directo. So if you just click on the subscribe button, if you just click on suscribirme, you'll be able to get like notifications from us whenever we upload content, and all of these recordings and many more you'll have access to if you just go to the YouTube channel, right? So remember, subscribe. It's useful. We'll be posting other interesting stuff there, right? Like you can go there and you'll see all of the other interesting stuff here already, right? So anyway, I think that's pretty much everything for today, guys. I don't know if anybody maybe didn't ask any final questions that you'd like to ask Heather still, or have they asked you all of the questions they want to ask you, Heather?
I think so. There were a couple in the chat, and then yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. All right, you guys. So I would just like to say thank you very much, Heather. We always appreciate it when you help us with these webinars. You come and give us all of these wonderful ideas. I'm pretty sure everybody appreciates all of these. Well, loads of information, absolutely. So thank you very much, Heather. Thank you, guys. Any final words, Heather, or advice to the crowd?
No, thanks for everybody for participating. Yeah, and sharing your ideas.
Awesome. So thank you, Heather. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys, and stay tuned, and see you next time, right? Remember, May the 27th, register there in the links I sent. Okay, so thank you, guys, and goodbye. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.